This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Freilichen Purim. This is the first year of Zoom Purim. A Zoom Purim. Last year on Purim, nobody knew what was coming. Nobody had any inkling of what the year would be like. Everybody came to shul. I was listening to a shir I gave last year Purim. I was coughing. Everybody thought everything was fine. Meanwhile, I think I had corona on Purim last year. I remember I lay in the Megillah with corona. I said the word charvoina with corona. But Baruch Hashem, this year we, they say in Chelm the carpets are very dusty. They have very dusty carpets in Chelm. You know why? Because they're anti-vax. They don't use vacuum cleaners over there, and things get very dusty. So I want to speak out of Kasha on the Megillah. We've discussed this question in the past, but we're going to offer a completely new approach. This Kasha is the Kasha of none other than Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz asks what I think is the most obvious question on the Megillah, but we're so used to all the various, the story from the time, my friend Rav Moshe Klein, how you doing? Don't give away the secret yet, Rav Moshe. Okay, so Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz has the following kasha. The storyline of the Megillah is, so Achashverosh tells Vashti, "No, come out, Vashti, display yourself." And Vashti says, "I'm not coming. You can't even drink." And he says, "That's it. We're going to kill you." And he kills Vashti. And then Esther becomes the queen. And then Mordechai overhears the plot to kill the king. And Mordechai sends word to Esther, and Esther tells Achashverosh. And they write down in the book of Zechronos that Mordechai is tried to help out the king. Then Haman rises to power, and then Haman makes a gzeira on Klal Yisrael. Meanwhile, Haman runs into the king's palace because he wants to hang Mordechai, and that night the king couldn't sleep, so he tells Haman, "What should I do to somebody who I would like to honor?" And Haman says he should ride the royal horse and wear the royal clothing. And Achashverosh says, "Okay, go do that to Mordechai." And by the way, that part of the Megillah has like this really dramatic trop. Balaylahu. Rav Nosson, how do you do Balaylahu? Go for it. That's pretty good. Okay, so by the way, the other Milel Milra that is it's not it's kiyimu v'kibelu hayudim. A lot of people say kiyimu v'kibelu. Okay, it's a milra. Anyway, the way I do it is Balaylahu nadidash nas hamelech. Okay, I don't know where that comes from, but so everybody makes a big deal that the king couldn't sleep. And Haman comes in, and Achashverosh tells Haman, "Lead Mordechai through the street." And for one day, Mordechai is riding the royal horse, and Haman is leading him through the street. And we know Haman's daughter drops the garbage on his head. Okay, that's a very, very nice part of the story, but it has nothing to do with the storyline. Because as soon as Haman led Mordechai through the street, and Mordechai rode on the royal horse, as soon as that little episode was over, Vayashav Mordechai al Shar HaMelech, but the bottom line is, Haman is going back to his Sakva Efer. There's a gallows, 50 amos tall, looming in Mordechai's backyard, basically, that he's going to hang on very soon. So the little story, who's that teddy bear? Who is that? What is that? 612-8156? Shkoyach. That was a good, who is that? What? Mazeh? That's Mordechai? No, that's not Mordechai. Mordechai didn't look. That's Uncle Moshe. No. Anyway, so this whole little episode did not change the storyline b'chlal. At the end of the day, Mordechai is still going to be hanged, and Haman is going to annihilate the Jewish people. So this whole Balayla Ahu with the whole trup and the whole Hamelech and everything is getting very exciting. It does not contribute to the salvation of the Jewish people. Ki hu zeh. Because when it's all said and done, Mordechai returns to his sackcloth, and there's still a gzeira to annihilate Klal Yisrael, and Mordechai is still going to hang. So what's this all about? What's this whole Balayla Hahu? You could take those prakim out of the Megillah. Parak Dalet to Parak Zayin, you could take out of the Megillah, and then Megillah will take about 20 minutes, and then everything is great. I mean, why do we need all those extra psukim? It's nice, Mordechai rode on a horse, but it has nothing to do with the story. That's the question we want to address today. Another kasha, this question is the question of the Tiferes Shlomo. So the first question is the question of Rabbi Yonasan Eibishitz. The second question is the question of the Tiferes Shlomo. And Mordechai is wearing the sackcloth. He's mourning. He's doing tshuva. He's crying. Vayitzak tzaka gedayla umara. And he's wearing sakva efer. So what happens? Esther says, "Vatishlach begadim abishas Mordechai." She sends clothing to dress Mordechai, ulahasir saka and to remove his sackcloth. I have a question. Mordechai didn't have clothing in his closet? What you think? Mordechai ran out of clothing. Mordechai didn't go to the suit store in a very long time. All his suits had holes in them. And he was wearing sak ve'efer because he had nothing better to wear. So she said, "Hey Mordechai, here's a new suit." You don't think Mordechai had clothing? Well, Mordechai was not out of clothing. You think Mordechai... Elamai, Esther felt that it was not proper for Mordechai to be standing in the king's courtyard wearing sak ve'efer. So she sent a message that it's not... I should mute myself. How are you going to hear me if I mute myself? No? Are you going to read my words? You're going to... Okay, maybe. No. So, Esther knows that Mordechai has clothing. So, Mordechai has clothing, fine. Elamai, Esther feels that it's not proper for Mordechai to appear in the king's palace wearing sackcloth. So she should send word. Mordechai, you're not doing the wrong thing. Take off your sackcloth and... All right, we'll mute everyone. Take off your sackcloth and dress like a mensch. Put on your bekisha, put on your strimo, but you can't walk around in sackcloth in the king's palace. But why does Esther have to send Mordechai clothing? When Mordechai ran out of clothes, the 9 days he couldn't do laundry. What is this all about that Esther needs to send Mordechai clothing? So I'll tell you a little story. The story is set over by Reb Simcha Bunim of Parshescha. He says he was once in Danzig, and he was walking by the water, and he sees a guy drowning in the water. So he says to the guy, Reb Yid, do me a favor, when you die down on the bottom of the river, send regards to the Levyasan. Shikta gris zum Levyasan. So, all of a sudden, and everyone's looking at the Reb Simcha Bunim like he's an achzar. How could he do such a thing? The guy's drowning. Okay, you don't want to jump in and save him, so don't save him. But what, you're mocking the guy? The guy Nebuch is drowning. He's gasping for air, and you're telling him to send regards to Levyasan? But to everyone's utter surprise, all of a sudden the guy heard that ridiculous remark, and he sort of he smirked a little bit. He thought it was humorous. And all of a sudden he smiled, and he was energized, and he got koyach, and he started to paddle, and he started to swim, and he saved himself. Says Reb Simcha Bunim, Ki besimcha seitzeu. That there are certain things in life that you could do tshuva, you ain't going to get out of it. You could daven, you ain't going to get out of it. There's only one way to get out of the mess. You need a little simcha. A little simcha could get you out of a mess that nothing else could get you out of. This guy is about to drown. He's about to fall to the bottom of the river. And the only thing that could have saved him was a good joke. And that joke gave him the energy, gave him a new perspective, changed things around for him, and helped him out of the mess. By the way, according to this Yesod, we understand the new pshat in the Teichacha. In the Teichacha, first of all, Rashi brings down in Parshas Pinchas that every day of Sukkot we bring 14 kvasim, a total of 98 kvasim. Says Rashi in Parshas Pinchas, the 98 kvasim that we bring on Sukkot protects us, saves us from the 98 curses of the Teichacha. Because why does the Teichacha come? Because you didn't serve God with joy. So, through the 98 kvasim on Sukkot, the Yom Tov of Sukkot is a Yom Tov of joy, of celebration, of happiness. So that's Megan, that protects us from the Teichacha. But now we're learning it could be that Simcha saves us from Einshim. It extricates us from Einshim. It pulls us out of a bad situation. Says the Torah in Parshas Kisavai, you know why you're having all these punishments? Because you don't serve God in joy. If you would only serve God in joy, then you wouldn't be subject to these punishments. Sometimes the only way out of a mess, sometimes the only way out of a good time, out of a difficult situation, is if a person has some simcha. Without simcha, there's no way out of the mess. Tachas hashalo yavadata as Hashem aleikecha b'simcha. So, says the Tiferes Shlomo, here's a very interesting debate going on between Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai understands Klal Yisrael's b'tzara. So how are we going to get out of the tzara? So Mordechai puts on his sackcloth, he puts on his ashes, he's mourning, he's crying, he's doing tshuva, he's being mispalel. How else are you going to get out of this situation? However, says the Tiferes Shlomo, the yira and the tefillah is the lower madrega. One has to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'dechilu u'rechimu. B'dechilu is with fear, u'rechimu is with love. But first comes fear, no question, first comes fear. The first thing is a person has to be in total awe and reverence and yira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the extent where everything in the world is batel. One is so afraid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's like there's nothing else in the world other than Hashem. But once a person recognizes there's nothing other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then a person's neshama is drawn to yearn and to seek and to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The chilu leads to the rechimu, the fear leads to the love. And the love, the ahava, is able to get a person out of any matzav. The simcha is able to get a person out of any matzav. Ki b'simcha seitzea. We once said, and we have to write this one down one day, that one of the inyanim, why Simchas Torah follows the Yomim Noraim, is because if on Yomim Noraim, a person, it was decreed on a person, chas v'shalom, an oynesh, a punishment, a difficulty. So yeah, we try to get it off on Rosh Hashanah, we try to get it off on Yom Kippur, but at the end of the day, the best way to remove the Einshim, the Makah b'Patish, is ki b'simcha seitzeu, Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is sort of the last and best way to extricate oneself from tzara. Tachas hashalo yavadatas Hashem lekecha. It's a new pshat. Not that the Teichacha comes as a punishment for not serving Hashem b'simcha. It's because you didn't serve Hashem b'simcha, now you're subject to these Einshim. If you would have served Hashem b'simcha, you would have been able to get out of it. Esther and Mordechai had the following Machlokes. Mordechai said, before we come to Simcha, we need a lot of hachana, we need a lot of preparation. We need sakva efer, yutza la rabbi. We need tza'aka gedoyla umara. Vatishlach Esther begodim lahalbish es Mordechai. She says, Mordechai, listen up. You're crying and your tshuva and all of your sad avodas Hashem, it ain't going to cut it. You need to put on your big day Shabbos. You need to wear your royal begadim. You need to be besimcha, because ki besimcha seitseyu, if you take off your sakva efer and you accord yourself with great ava besimcha, that's going to get us out of the mess. Says the Tiferes, and who was right? Esther was right. How do you know Esther was right? Because Esther comes to the first party and she says, Achashverosh. Esther goes in. Who's there? Esther. Esther, I didn't call you. Who asked you to come? Esther comes in. Chazal say, the Malachim came, pushed the scepter to Esther. Esther said, Achashverosh, come to a party in an hour. Fine, no problem. So Achashverosh shows up at the party, and Haman's at the party, and Esther says, Achashverosh says, no, what would you want to do? What would you like? And Esther says, let's come back tomorrow. So the Ibn Ezra asks, well, what's tomorrow? Let them do it today. Nothing changed. The Ibn Ezra says that Esther was looking for a simin min hashamayim that things are going to turn. In the interim, Achashverosh couldn't sleep, and Haman's coming in the morning. Achashverosh thinks Haman is coming to kill him, and Achashverosh says to Haman, "Lead Mordechai through the streets in my royal clothing, not in his sakva efer." So Haman comes to Mordechai, and Mordechai is wearing sakva efer, and Haman says, No. If you think you're getting out of this mess in your sakva efer, it ain't happening. We gotta give you need a haircut. So the Gemara says that Esther closed all the barber shops in town. She made up there's a pandemic and you have to close all the barber shops. And Haman happened to be a barber, and Haman gives Mordechai a haircut, and he bathes Haman, and Haman climbs up, Mordechai climbs up on Haman's back onto the horse. And this whole little episode we asked is completely unnecessary. It didn't contribute to the miracle. At the end of the story, Mordechai goes back to his sakva efer. No. This was the turning point in the Purim story. Why? Because until this day, everyone was walking around, moping, groping, doing tshuva, tainus. You ain't going to get out of the mess that way. But all of a sudden, one day, they see Mordechai is wearing Shabbos clothing, and he's sparkling clean, and that wretched Haman is leading him through the streets. So even though Klal Yisrael knew that in a couple of days they're going to be destroyed, but when they saw Haman leading Mordechai through the streets, you know what they did? They cracked a smile. Oh, they cracked a smile. Ki b'simcha seitzeyu, already the gezerah started to be rescinded. The Yibam Shem says, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the sakva efer. I'm not looking for the tainus. I'm not looking for your depression and your worry and your anxiety and your nervousness. That's not what I want. I want you to laugh. I want you to, even if it's not so funny, it's just crack a smile. That's why people, they don't show their face on the Zoom. Because they're smiling, they're laughing. They just put their name there because they're rolling off their chair. They're like falling on their head. And then when they get on, they're like straight face, like nothing happened. I know what was going on before when you're hiding behind your name. But just joking, by the way. You could do whatever you want. You could hide behind your name. You could call yourself whatever you want. Mr. Nister. You could be, I don't know what your names are. AAA, AAA, quadruple A. Anyway, so once Mordechai was led through the street, wearing the royal begadim, and Klal Yisrael had a degree of simcha, that was the tachas Hashem le'avadas Hashem le'kecha, the simcha that extricated them from that gezerah that they were in. So we should all be zoicha on through the simcha of Purim to reach the highest madrigos of avodas Hashem. The Arizal says the highest levels that he experienced of avodas Hashem was when he was besimcha shel mitzvah. Yes, yira is important, but the higher madrega, the madrega which is more beneficial to us and will bring us more Yeshua, is the simcha shel mitzvah. And that was the machlokes between Esther and Mordechai. And in a way, that was the turning point in the story. So really, it's a little bit ironic that we lane it in the Yom Noram Nigan. Maybe next year we'll lane it in Simchas Torah Nigan. How do you do it? We'll work on it for next year. But that should really be the tune, so to speak, of what's taking place in Balayla Hahu, that Klal Yisrael for the first time experienced a little joy, a little happiness, and they're able to extricate themselves from the Gzeira, and from there on, the rest was history. So tomorrow we're finishing Masechta Megillah. For those who stuck it out until the end of the Masechta, we had an idea that maybe we're going to start, we're going to review Masechta Tainis, and we could finish it Erev Pesach, and make a siyum on that. So let Gedalia know if you want to do that, and then he'll be happy to bombard you with shiurim on Masechta Tainis, and wishing everybody a Freilich and Purim, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. We'll see what the schedule is tomorrow. Wishing everyone a Freilich and Purim. Thanks for tuning in. Bracha v'hatzlacha. And a niggin. Someone has a niggin?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.